Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Remote No Pressure Podcast. We're super excited that you're listening, that you're part of what's going on here. We're going to dive right into the interview today. I mean, there's a couple things. I mean, if you could rate us on iTunes or Stitcher or whatever your platform is, that really helps. And also be sure to join our mailing list at remotenopressure.com. There's also some really cool things going on in the blog there. You can see some performances that we did this week and some stuff in the news. So with that business stuff aside, I just want to dive right into Keith Allen. That's our guest this week. And, something that's always fascinated me is how do people get some jobs? Have you ever maybe watched TV or watched something and you're like, how did so-and-so get that job? That's kind of a crazy job. And that's exactly the reason we reached out to Keith Allen is he's had what a great career he's had, going from Florida State University and doing radio to hosting the X Games to hosting the Olympics. I mean, who does that? So we're going to talk to him a little bit about his journey and how he got from point A to point B. And before we dive in, one of the things that's crazy and that's always fascinated me about these jobs and stuff, there's a great book out called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And I mean, I'm not paid to endorse that or anything like that. I'm just saying if you are interested in this subject and how people get from point A to point B in some odd way, check out the book Outliers, because it talks a lot in there about how the stars align and we have to work hard and work hard and be diligent. And when the opportunity presents itself, we must be ready. Well, Keith Allen, he worked hard and he was very diligent. And when the opportunity presented itself, he hit a home run. Welcome to the podcast. Let's light the fire. Today on the Remote No Pressure Podcast, we have Keith Allen with us. Thank you very much, Keith, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Yeah, well, tell us a little bit about yourself, and I mean, you've hosted the X Games, you've been a big part of BASS and the Redfish Cup and all of this. Is it the Redfish Cup? Is that right, Keith?
It was. It isn't anymore, but it was.
I mean, you've been in a lot of places, emceeing and talking to crowds. Can you tell us? I mean, most of us, when a lot of people, when they grow up, they want to be accountants or whatever. Very few people say, I want to grow up and host the X Games because mom and dad will probably tell us that's not a real job. You need to get a real job. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got into that and what that process was like, Keith?
Right. Well, growing up, there wasn't an X Games until I got a little older. So you're absolutely right. I'll be honest with you. I didn't really have dreams of the path that I ended up traveling down. In fact, I would say that it was beyond what I could have dreamed. I started out. I grew up in South Florida, down in Miami, which was just a phenomenal outdoor playground as a kid, and spent every weekend. I mean, even as a little kid, every day after school, pretty much, bass fishing in the canal across the street, and then. As I got a little older and we got a boat, we were, flats fishing in Flamingo in the Everglades National Park and whatnot. And in any case, went to college and was a business major, undecided business major, like many of us were in those days, and was going through my basic coursework, taking the core classes, and I don't know, somewhere around microeconomics, I said to myself, how am I going to make a career out of this? It's just not like for me. And so I looked in the course book to try and find something that would be of interest to me to at least try it out. Right. And so I took an advertising class and that just it seemed so logical to me, and I was interested in it. And that was kind of like my step into the communication school. And right about that time, I was at Florida State. This was in the mid to late 80s, right? 85 to 89. And the university was getting ready to sign on, summer of 1987, getting ready to sign on their college radio station for the first time. and I'd always been a fan of music, but I'd never like so much as called a radio station for a T-shirt, And and I walked in one summer. I was staying for the summer one session, and I walked into the radio station and got a job, basically helping build the music library. I was like an assistant music director, and we would, yes, this was vinyl back in those days. I'd grab a stack of vinyl, and I'd listen to records for hours and hours, and I'd categorize songs for the music library. And then in the fall, we were getting ready to sign on the air, and I went to the program director and asked if I could get an air shift, and I actually got a morning shift. We all did like one shift a week, so actually flipped the switch. Was the first guy to flip the switch on the radio station at Florida State.
Wow.
And that was in 1987. And started down that broadcast path and graduated, and started working in commercial radio at rock stations in Jacksonville and then up in Georgia, and first in production and then in programming. And the broadcast industry was just consolidating so rapidly. Stations were getting bought and sold at horrific paces. Didn't matter what your ratings were. The chances are your station was getting sold and you were moving on. So we had at the time consolidated to, at that point we had 3 rock stations in the building, 3 program directors, and I saw the writing on the wall. And so I began looking for alternatives and started freelancing as an audio guy, and was producing, built a little studio in the house, and I was producing, commercials and audio recordings. And at the time had a buddy that I had met in Augusta that moved down to Orlando to work with the Pro Wakeboard and Water Ski Tour. And I was coming in town for a wedding of all things. And he invited me he says, come in early. We'll go to a Widespread Panic show in Tampa, and I'll get you an interview with my boss. We really need help on the tour. Our announcer's horrible. We got an audio engineer that's blowing up equipment and a DJ that's horrible, and you could probably do it all. So I came in town. We went to the show, had a great time. Go into the office the next morning and meet his boss, and they say, we have 2 events left. One's the national championships and one's the world championships. How'd you like to do them? And I said, wow, that sounds great, but I'd like to actually go see an event, and they had like 1 regular season event left. I flew out to Portland with them and watched the event, and it was killer. I mean, really, really cool to see these guys. And this was, we're talking now, I guess, late 90s in wakeboarding. And it was really at the cusp of the sport blowing up. And so got involved with the Pro Wakeboard and Water Ski Tour, and the company at the time was World Sports and Marketing, now known as Bonner Corporation, which owns lots and lots of lifestyle magazines, including Saltwater Fishing, lots of fishing titles, Boating Magazine, and they've got a couple TV shows, etc. So, in any case, wakeboarding was part of X Games at the time. I reached out to X Games to see if they needed any help with wakeboarding, and ended up getting contracted to host everything. From and in those days it was like 1 announcer, and you would do you'd run from a skateboard venue to a BMX venue to wakeboarding to inline skating, and just running and gunning all day long.
Wow.
But I was always a fan of those sports, right? I was never very good at them, but I was always a fan. I was always a fan of those sports, and so I would announce as a fan. I mean, I really kind of felt that energy and excitement of it, and the crowd fed off of that, and it was an amazing time, and I learned a tremendous amount about crowd interaction. When you're in radio, you're kind of like, it's the imaginary crowd, and you're trying to speak and relate to your audience in radio. And in live events, you really have a chance to get to feel the pulse of that crowd and kind of manipulate them in whatever direction you need. Right. And so we did all kinds of sport, from summer sports, winter sports, everything that you can imagine, from speed climbing and ice climbing to snowmobile racing and freestyle motocross. I was doing all that. And then Bonner, World Sports and Marketing at the time, decided they were going to have a fishing tournament in New Smyrna Beach called Fish Stock, and asked me if I would come host the weigh-in. And I said, absolutely. And so I went and did that event. And then I don't know, I guess around 2000, ESPN had lost their NASCAR contract, and they had purchased Bass. They were trying to replace that audience. And so I had obviously a pretty good relationship with ESPN at that time, because I had been announcing all these X Games events around the world. And one of my producers from X Games called me up and said, hey, we're doing this fishing thing at Bass Pro Shops in Orlando, which is where I was living at the time. Not actually living in the Bass Pro Shops, but living in Orlando. And it was, 6 Bass Pros and 6 NASCAR drivers for charity. And she had no idea I fished. Well, I was actually on my skiff in Mosquito Lagoon red fishing at the time. So I'm like, I'm there. And went and did the event, did the same event the following year. And then they asked me to, if I was interested in coming on tour, which obviously I was. That was something I was extremely passionate about.
Uh-huh.
And so that evolved into I was actually in 2004, I was in Greece announcing the Summer Olympics, archery at the Summer Olympics. And and I got a call from the director at Bass, and asked me if I wanted to come do the Elite Series. And I said, well, it wasn't even the Elite Series at that time, but asked if I wanted to come do the Bassmaster Series. And I said, absolutely. And so that led to just a tremendous opportunity to travel the country, fish with obviously some of the greatest anglers in the country in terms of bass fishing, and learn new techniques, learn bodies of water, get my hands on all kinds of gear. It was just tremendous. And so JM Associates, who was producing the television component for Bass, was also had started the Redfish Cup, the El Boy Alberto Redfish Cup. And I would say, in terms of where my passion lies on the flats. Even, bass fishing is a blast for me, and I love it. And it's probably what I do the most out of convenience. I can sneak out for, heck, where I live now, you can pull off the side of the road and fish for 20 minutes on your way to a meeting. So bass fishing has always been an escape for me and something I can sneak away to, but my real passion is on the flats. So, one thing led to another. Great opportunity to go do that and be involved with, something that I was really passionate about. When it came to X Games, I would come home from those events. I wouldn't come home and flip motorcycles. In fact, I'll never flip a motorcycle on purpose. I can say this, but I would come home from those events and I would fish. That's my R&R. That's my sanctuary. So the opportunity to do that and be involved at that level, and host on the world's biggest stage, was beyond what I could have dreamed of. I really had no idea at the time that you could make a living doing that.
Speaking of that, I mean, we talked briefly at the beginning of the podcast. I alluded to, a lot of people don't grow up thinking I'm gonna host the Olympics in Athens. I mean, maybe, but philosophically, or on a bigger picture here, Keith, how many people do you think actually plan out their lives, say, right when they're in high school? Like with you, it was like from, in the 80s when you're in college, at Florida State, and, you happen to walk into this radio studio, it all happened kind of, but how many people actually plan out their lives perfectly and it all falls into place?
Well, a lot of people may plan it. Okay, you could plan. And you know what? I think that today, a lot more, there's a lot more structure and a lot more pre-planning because the eh, the world is a different place, and the work environment is so competitive. You know, I have young kids, elementary and middle school age, and you know, at the orientations, the teachers would tell us that, and the administration would tell us that, you know, certain kids take certain classes because their parents want them to go to certain colleges, and they know that they have to have these courses for this college, and this course for that college. I can't imagine doing that to my 11-year-old,
Mm,
right?
right.
You know, I want the best for my kids, but there, you also have to be a kid, and you also have to figure out your own path. By the same token, I have a nephew who's a freshman in college, and he's already being recruited by Google.
Mm,
Okay, at 18 years old, and so you know, it's a different landscape now than it was when I was a kid. Now, will he stay on that path? I don't know, but it's you know, for me, I got to that point where the career that I thought I was the most passionate about, the landscape changed, right? And there's so much evolving in the world today that you can't really guarantee that the job you have or the career you have today is even going to exist
mm,
20 years from now, right?
right.
Because look at the evolution of the Amazons of the world and artificial intelligence and robotics and all those things. You know, I mean, there's the landscape is changing, and it's changing fast.
Mm,
And you know, for me, I was riding that wave for a really long time. I was kind of like, hey, let's just ride this and see where it goes, which um, was fantastic. You know, I had just an unbelievable opportunity to travel around the world, host some of the biggest events in the world in front of uh, you know, hundreds of thousands. Well, at this point, cumulatively, you know, millions of people.
mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, I've had a very very you know, I was blessed and have had a long and successful run. But as I started having kids and started thinking about the future, I got to the point where I decided, you know, if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there. And so I kind of felt like I needed to carve out some things for myself and take a little bit more control over my destiny and my future for the sake of my family, and started creating some companies to do that. And it's, you know, it's not a direct path necessarily, uh, but it's been really really interesting. It's been unbelievably educational, and um, very very rewarding at sometimes, and very very stressful at others.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what you're currently doing. Your company, Mark Five Strategies, and one of the things that said in your bio and your LinkedIn was you're a storyteller or a brand storyteller. What do you think makes a great story?
um, you know, this really started for me, you know, obviously early on from my broadcast career, where you're visualizing your audience and you're trying to relate to them and connect to them, and if you just regurgitate information, you're not really engaging anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, through all the different types of sports that I did, listen, I grew up in Miami. I never ice climbed. I rock climbed, but I never ice climbed. um, I I, you know, enjoyed some recreational skateboarding and bike riding as a kid, not to the level of the Shaun Whites and the Tony Hawks that I was announcing, um, but and of course then into bass fishing, etc. Always tried to relate to my audience and find something that could connect them to whatever it was that we were talking about, whether it's whether it is, you know, the athletes and the drama and the battle that is, you know, ensuing in the competition, whether it is a product, whatever it is to me, vitally important to be able to relate and find something that you can connect and relate to your audience with, so that you know they're finding something tangible out of it that's memorable to them.
Hmm. Do you have any good examples of some brands maybe you represent, maybe you don't, just something on TV or something we can all like have an example of, Keith?
Well, sure. Um, in some of my own work, I've certainly always tried to do that. But let me give you something on a broad spectrum that probably everybody has seen at some point in time.
Hmm.
And this is top of mind for me because I just went to the ASA Fishing Industry Summit a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about um, uh, take me fishing. Right? Remember we all know takemefishing.org, and um, lots of kind of general basic information about fishing, but it's an advocacy group for fishing, obviously.
Hmm.
And there was a commercial years ago that ran, and it was like, the daughter talking, take me fishing so we can experience this, and take me fishing before we, so we can have this time together on the water. Take me fishing so we can bond. And I think that the last line on it was, uh, she's, it starts as it's a little girl, and every year, every line, every time that she says take me fishing, she's a little bit older, and she's a little girl, then she's going through high school and she's playing with her friends, and then she's in, you know she's in college, and now she's walking down the aisle, and the last line is take me fishing before it's too late.
Wow.
And I think that everybody could find, at least every parent, right, every
Hmm.
dad
Right.
or mom
Right.
could relate to that,
Hmm.
in terms of, your time is limited. Those of us who are passionate about fishing, and we're all passionate for different reasons, but I think uh, um, everybody um, who is passionate about fishing enjoys the outdoors, enjoys the time with friends and family when they are fishing together. uh, that I think that was something that lots of people related to. I have, in some of my own work, done a lot of work with Patrick Sabile from Sabile Lures, and Patrick is one of the most passionate um, passionate people you'll ever meet. I mean, if he's into something, he's all into something, and he's obviously all into fishing. Um, I mean, he is a mad scientist of fishing. There's no question about it. And we tried to always capture his heart and soul in what we were doing, right? From his, how he designs and what he puts into his designs, to the way he fishes. And this is a guy, man. We would go fish. The first time I fished with him, I actually met him at the Bassmaster Classic one year, and this is pretty strong brand story for him. Patrick founded his brand in Europe, and he was a long time angler and world record holder, and he at the time owned a lodge in Africa, and he was working, doing some design work for various other lure manufacturers, and never really getting the credit. He was that guy kind of behind the scenes. And if you know Patrick, or ever get the chance to meet him, you'll realize he's more of the um, type A kind of guy. And so he had launched the company in Europe and had some success, and then wanted to bring it to the U.S. So he came over and put together a small team. And I was in a rare position uh, where I was the guy hosting the two highest profile events in fishing, on TV, which was the Bassmaster Elite Series and Bassmaster Classic, and the Oboy Alberto Redfish Cup.
Hmm.
Well, in the period of one season, there were a couple of victories on lures on the bass side, on a flat shad and a magic swimmer. And then, a parallel to that, on the Redfish Cup, there were wins on stick shad, and so I was really, aside from him and his team, probably one of the only people who was actually alert to that.
Mm.
And so I kind of, I obviously told that story through, through both of those tours as we would see those victories unfold. And since I've asked him about, launching, as he's been a great friend, and I've been able to confide in him a lot over the years. And we've talked about brand building, and launching companies here in the U.S. And he said the only reason, he was able to survive that first year was because they had those victories and that exposure.
Mm.
And so, you know, for him to be able to do that and accomplish that, it's not the kind of thing that you can plan for. Anybody can say, yeah, all we got to do is go out and get, 4 tournament wins on the 2 biggest tours in the U.S. and we'll be fine.
Right,
You can't
right.
you can't forecast
You
that.
can't plan that, no.
I mean, and so we had a similar situation with Mark V. Our first real big opportunity came with a company called Land of Outdoors, and they had approached us, and at the time had a prototype hook, and wanted to launch for ICAST in 2016. And I saw this hook, and it was just like really unconventional design, but I saw in my eyes, and in my mind, I knew some applications that this could be, if it worked, could be a game changer. On paper, it looked phenomenal, but until I, got my hands on it and fished with it, you really had to validate it. Well, we ended up um, getting contracted to kind of redesign the prototype, build a product line around it, source manufacturing, do the branding, do the packaging, manage the PR, of course, all the video content production, because that's my background, and launched at ICAST in 2016. And we launched at the on the water day on Tuesday. Wednesday, we had won the new product showcase in terminal tackle, and Thursday had sales reps signed coast to coast, US and Canada, and by Friday had, 2 of the 3 largest distributors in the country signed, and it was like, holy cow.
Wow.
That was our goal, that was our plan, that was our strategy,
Mhm.
but you can't guarantee it's going to happen. You can put yourself in the best possible position and do all the things that you feel you need to do to try and make it happen, but at the end of the day, it's not all in your control. And in 2017, just before ICAST, and Trapper, now the company Land and Outdoors is a parent company. Trapper Tackle is the actual brand. Trapper Hooks, you may have heard of them.
Mhm.
So they came out with a treble hook version of this design, and about probably a month before ICAST, had a win on the FLW tour and the front cover of FLW magazine, with with their hooks that then ended up winning new product showcase again in 2017. So,
Wow.
like, things like that, you cannot plan for. You're always striving for it.
Mhm.
Strategically, you're trying to put yourself in position for it, but you can't guarantee it, right? And
Right.
so, just a phenomenal set of circumstances to unfold, for Trapper to win back-to-back new product showcase awards at ICAST.
Wow, that's a great story. Now, we have seen a big shift in retail, and we've talked a lot about it. We've talked to a number of fly shop owners here on our podcast. Used to, I mean, you there was only one place in town to buy tippet or to buy flies, but now the internet's opened up, and there's a lot of shifts going on, and a lot of these fly shops are trying to figure out, where do we fit in and all that. What would be a good way to start? What would be a good strategy for them to kind of set themselves apart from a lot of their online competitors?
I was Um, as I mentioned, I was at the ASA Fishing Industry Summit recently, and this is a big topic um, for the industry because the landscape is changing. Just like we talked about with careers, the landscape is changing. The Amazon effect is real, um, and there's no denying it, right? So you can sit there and watch it unfold, and you can go, "Oh, well, we're going to do our thing." And guess what? You you you're going to have a hard time staying open. And so it's really important for brick and mortar shops, and even more so for boutique shops, like a lot of fly shops tend to be, to get active digitally, get active on social media, have a website, have a good website, not a website that your nephew built for you 8 years ago. Actually have a good website, because your website is really the hub of all of your digital activity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to do, you know, if you're going to get a Facebook page going, and you're going to get some Facebook ads going, and you're going to have some Google ads going, if they're all pointing back to a website that doesn't convert, then guess what? You're just spending money and time driving traffic to a website that doesn't convert.
Right.
So get your website dialed in, and um, and make sure that you've got something for people to come to. So it's and to compete, so that you're not just there and just another web address that people go to, click around, and are gone. To actually compete, you have to deliver content of value to your audience. And in fly fishing, fishing in general, I love this industry, and I love this market, and I love the fact that content marketing is so viable, because anybody can do it. You don't have to be a production expert to do it, but to be able to deliver something of value to your audience as an angler, as a fly angler. What are you interested in? What do you always have? What do you always have a thirst for knowledge for?
What fly to use, what the hatch is, and
What fly to use,
how to
what the
catch
hatch
fish.
is, how to catch more fish. That's the root of it, right?
Right.
How to catch more fish. There's not an angler worth his salt that's not interested in ways to catch more fish, or places to catch more fish,
Right. Right.
or gear to catch more fish with, right? We're
Right.
junkies. So we all have an appetite for content. And whether you do a weekly um, little couple minutes blurb, whether you do a podcast, something that you're doing, you know fly shops tend to be very regional, right? And you're going to
Mm.
stock the flies that are and the gear that is appropriate for your location. What the fly shop has in Idaho is going to be vastly different from what Sandy Moret has down here at Florida Keys Outfitters in Islamorada,
Right.
right? But you can speak to your audience, and guess what? Fly anglers tend to travel, right? They
Right.
tend to go on destination trips. So, the guy in there's a guy in Texas who's probably going to fish in Alaska, and probably going to fish in Idaho, and probably going to fish in the Keys at some point in his life, right?
Right. Right.
Or Belize or whatever, right?
Right.
So to be able to deliver content that appeals to your market, appeals to your audience, um, and whether you want to do seminars in your shop, or online seminars, the beauty of the online seminar or webinar is that you can do it. Even if you do it in your shop, if you record it, it's something that can now live on the internet, live on your website forever, on a YouTube channel,
Mm-hmm.
and can always deliver value to your audience, and always deliver value to your business.
Mm.
So don't be afraid to create content. The more you can create, the absolute better. Obviously, it needs to be um, valuable content, but the options are limitless. And when it comes to fishing, tips and techniques, fly tying, product reviews, destination reviews. I mean, you could do something every day for the rest of your life and not run out of things to do.
That's very true. That's very true. Just creating that value to your customer, to the end
Create,
user.
listen, create value to your customers. Don't always try to sell them something,
Hmm.
right? Just
Hmm.
create value for your customers, and they're going to come to you because, listen, if you're the guy that's teaching me what fly to use, who am I going to come to when it's time to buy the fly?
Right.
I'm coming to you, right?
Right.
And if I can get it from you online, fantastic, because your shop might not be 5 miles from my house.
Hmm.
And you're always going to have those guys that are close to you that you can reach, but if you can expand your reach, then you have a better opportunity to expand your business.
Mm.
So don't be afraid to um, develop your website into an e-commerce site. There's some tools that make it very, very easy um, to kind of transform and put a shopping cart up. And if you have questions or need help with that kind of thing, by all means, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to point you in the right direction, and we can, we get you going. But um, in 2017 and beyond, if you do not have a digital footprint, you're going to get beat. And if you're not trying to engage your audience, you're going to get beat. Deliver value.
That's great, Keith. I really appreciate you taking some time with us. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that, Keith?
Um, the best way to reach me is by email, Keith at mark5strategies.com.
We'll put that up on our website and our blog note, or I'm sorry, we'll put that up in our um, podcast notes and then on our blog as well. And thank you very much for spending some time with us, Keith.
Man, thanks for having me. I love what you're doing, man.
Well, thank you, Keith, and thank you for listening to the Remote No Pressure podcast. Be sure to check out his website. We have links there in the show notes and also on our website at remotenopressure.com. Sign up for our mailing list, and whatever platform you use, be sure to rate us. We'd greatly appreciate that. And until next time, go fishing.